Johnson Young. Senator Roberts, you have the call.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here. Minister, I'd like to ask you a question, several questions in fact. In order to comply with the UN's Kyoto Climate Protocol in 1996, the then Howard Anderson Liberal Nationals government appropriated farmers' property, specifically land property rights. But Section 51, Clause 31 of our country's federal constitution requiring the payment of just terms compensation. So what the Howard Anderson government did was to deal with firstly the Borbidge National Party government in Queensland, state government, and later, that was in 1996, and then a memorandum of understanding, and then in 1998, the Howard Anderson government did a deal with the BT Labor government, again a state government. So these state governments initially signed a memorandum of understanding and later passed state laws forbidding the clearing of land under various guises such as native vegetation protection. So they appropriated farmers' property rights for the Howard Anderson government to comply with the UN's Kyoto Protocol. That's in writing from Premier Beattie, and it's quite clear from what the premiers have said in Queensland and New South Wales. Minister, is this fair, to go around the Constitution to appropriate someone's property rights, Australian citizens' property rights?
Well, look, that's asking a matter of opinion.
But of the Minister, I'm not asking it of the public servants.
Well, you can ask the Minister about government...
Is that a fair policy?
Well, Minister, if you wish to answer that, you can.
I mean, you're asking me to comment on policies going back to, well before my time in politics, in the first instance in the 1990s. So I might sort of take it as a comment. I understand the concerns you're raising. There's obviously been a lot of factors being debated there, and in terms of the constitutional issues you raise, well, of course, those issues are always a matter for the High Court.
Given that a few tens of thousands of farmers carried the burden for a whole nation just to comply with arbitrary UN dictates without compensation, and it was done deceptively to get around their constitutional rights as Australian citizens, is it reasonable...
Senator Roberts, imputation of improper motives is not in line with the standing orders. You should withdraw that. And
okay, I'll withdraw that. But it was clearly stated by the Queensland Premier that it was done to enable compliance with the Howard Anderson government with UN Kyoto Protocol. That was clearly stated. The Minister, are you aware that 7 years after Prime Minister Howard was removed from office, in 2014, in a major address to a global warming policy think tank that opposes the UN's deindustrialisation of Western civilisation, Prime Minister Howard admitted that on the matter of climate science, he was agnostic. Yet he put in place the renewable energy target. He had the first major party policy on emissions trading schemes or carbon tax. He was the first to introduce that as a policy, and he also appropriated or caused the appropriation of farmers' property rights. And yet he was agnostic on climate science.
I'm not aware of those comments.
So he appropriated property from tens of thousands of farmers to achieve our goals under UN dictates, and yet himself was agnostic on the climate science. So what will your government do to restore or compensate farmers for property stolen from them?
Well, look, you've made a number of assertions there. It's difficult for me to give perhaps a useful answer to you without dealing with all of the assertions, and it's difficult for me to deal with them. So
happy to have a conversation later.
Well, indeed, very happy to. But I might take. I mean, I think it's very difficult for me to answer. As I say, you've made a number of assertions. We could probably spend a lot of time on those. I don't know how useful it would be, but
and Senator Roberts,
I'd probably perhaps take it as a comment.
You do have the offer from the Minister there to engage some time. You have the Climate Change Authority here before you, so can I encourage you, if you have questions of them, to put questions to them?
Certainly. I will just make the point, though, that farmers are wanting either restoration of their lawful rights, the constitutional rights, or compensation for that. Thousands of farmers deserve it. Now, to the Climate Change Authority, your authority's toolkit for 2030 rehearsed all the familiar factoids. It shows a graph. I don't know the title of the graph, but it shows the various costs of various reductions of emissions and production of carbon dioxide, and the costs, and the most prominent, and the entire load is carried by this. The only one that declines significantly is land use, reflecting what I was just talking about with the Minister. So, are you willing to talk about your views on solar energy? Because, let me see, I think it was Arena said that solar energy is now the cheapest form of energy. My understanding is that in Saudi Arabia, that is correct. But when we factor in the fact that we need a certain area of land covered in solar panels, then you factor in the cloudy days, that doubles that area, so it's now double that cost. When you factor in the night time, no sun shines, not even in Saudi Arabia, that's triple the area. Then we need the cost of the battery. Solar becomes prohibitively and impossibly expensive. Can you make any comments on that?
Certainly. So Brad Archer, Chief Executive Officer of the Climate Change Authority. Senator, I'm not sure I have a lot to add to the advice that colleagues from other agencies have provided here this evening on that question. We look to the same reports, analysis and evidence that they do, including the International Energy Agency and authorities such as the Australian Energy Market Operator here in Australia. And the analysis and modelling that they put forward clearly shows that renewable energy, and in particular solar, is highly cost competitive compared against other new build technologies into the future. And that advice looks reasonably compelling.
It does look compelling on a per unit basis until we factor in the need for additional solar panels to cover for cloudy days and nighttime and batteries. Then it becomes prohibitively expensive. It becomes a parasitic malinvestment.
Senator, the analysis that I'm referring to, that I'm aware of, includes the costs of firming technologies that are required to ensure that we have a reliable electricity supply while relying predominantly on variable renewable energy technologies.
Well, the claims of climate change, and especially climate alarm, are driving this, but we've heard of worries tonight from several agencies, Snowy Hydro in particular, but also Minister Taylor was forthright enough to come out a couple of weeks ago and say he's very concerned about future prices, he's very concerned about grid stability, and he's very concerned about the loss of reliability from our energy sector. And what I've seen in the thread going through all these presentations is the use of terms. Firming, for example. Instead of unreliability or insecurity, the term is firming. Sounds lovely. Instead of high price, the term is subsidy or enhancement. Instead of instability, the term is frequency control auxiliary service. A service, an additional cost that doesn't come with baseload power from coal, oil, natural gas, nuclear or hydro. It's an addition. Instead of blackout, the term is system integrity protection system. Instead of power cuts, the term is demand management. Sounds wonderful. Instead of unreliables, the term is clean energy. What exactly do you do?
Senator, I'm just not quite sure what your question is that you'd like me to
Okay,
address.
I'll take a quote from your authority's report, or toolkit for 2030. Australia's electricity sector is undergoing a transformation. From all of the things that we took for granted, walking in and flipping a switch, reliability, the cheapest power in the world, to now amongst the most expensive. We're undergoing a transformation. Australia's electricity sector is undergoing a transformation. Government support for renewable energy, the emergence of new clean energy technologies, declining technology costs, and the need to replace an ageing coal-fired generation fleet are all playing a part. Then you continue. Currently, markets fail to adequately recognise and price climate-related risk because of a lack of information and short-termism in investment decision-making. However, this is changing quickly as relevant tools become available and financial regulators divert more attention to the issue. What are you doing? What do you do?
Well, Senator, I think in large part you've provided the answer by reading the material that's in the authority's report. There are a range of factors that are driving a transformation in the electricity sector. Some of those are related to the response to climate change impacts and risks, and others are a result of what's happening in the market itself and the need to replace ageing generation assets. And I think both the market and the market authorities are recognising that the cheapest way to do that and build the electricity system that we need in the future is with the low-cost technologies, and which also have the benefit of being low emissions. So we have a range of institutions that are spending a lot of time working out how to ensure that the electricity system of the future is stable and reliable and affordable. For example, the Energy Security Board is leading work on future market arrangements for the electricity sector. That's a major piece of work. And there are other institutions in the electricity sector which are also turning their mind to these issues. So, and I think there's a broad consensus that we have the technologies and we have the means of achieving an electricity system which does meet those goals.
Did you respond to my request put on notice for the evidence upon which it's all based, climate evidence?
Senator...
The reason I ask is I'm not trying to be cheeky or smart. I don't know, because we were flooded with responses late last week, just a few days before Senate estimates. And I don't know which ones have replied and which ones haven't, but we asked you for that. Where's your empirical scientific evidence showing that carbon dioxide from human activity affects climate and needs to be cut? We wanted the specific location of the evidence, the data, and the framework for proving that. We also wanted the specific relationship between carbon dioxide quantities that affect climate, temperature, wind, rainfall, etc. So you just mentioned, could you put it on and give me on notice, please? You just mentioned the effects of climate change that are already present and the risks that you foresee. Could you give me that on notice?
Well, I can give you that on notice, Senator. I can also attempt to answer that briefly
Sure,
here
on
today.
notice would be fine.
Certainly, Chair.
Right, thank you. And last question, please, Senator Roberts.
That's it, thank you.